This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has threatened to renew Israel's attacks on the Gaza Strip, saying the Israeli military will return to, quote, intense fighting unless Hamas agrees to release all remaining hostages by Saturday noon. This comes after President Trump said all hell is going to break out if the hostages aren't freed. Hamas has accused Israel of repeatedly violating the ceasefire. Meanwhile, Trump on Tuesday met with Jordan's King Abdullah at the White House, where Trump repeated his threat to take over Gaza and displace the entire Palestinian population. Reporters questioned Trump about his Gaza proposal.
Mr. President, you said before that the U.S. would buy Gaza, and today you just said we're not going to buy Gaza.
We're not going to have to buy. We're going to have Gaza. We don't have to buy. There's nothing to buy. We will have Gaza.
What does that mean?
No reason to buy. There is nothing to buy. It's Gaza. It's a war-torn area. We're going to take it. We're going to hold it. We're going to cherish it.
Mr. President, take it under what authority? It is sovereignty.
Under the U.S. authority.
That was President Trump sitting next to a grimacing King Abdullah of Jordan, who later wrote that they will not accept the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, and the president of Egypt, President Sisi, canceled his trip to the White House next week after these comments. We're joined now by Tariq Ali, Pakistani-British historian, activist, filmmaker, editor of the New Left Review, author of over 50 books, including just out, You Can't Please All, Memoirs 1980 to 2024. Welcome back to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us on this side of the pond. But I do have to ask you, Mick Jagger wrote that Rolling Stones song for you, Street Fighting Man?
Yeah, he wrote it and sent it to me, a handwritten version, saying, could you put this in the paper? I just wrote this for you. I edited a radical newspaper at the time, and the BBC are refusing to play this song. So we did publish the song, and of course, a few weeks later, the BBC did play it. I mean, that was a time when politics and culture, radical politics, radical culture, were very mixed up together in a good sense.
So let's go back to Gaza. You have President Trump doubling, tripling, quadrupling down, saying he doesn't even have to buy Gaza. He'll have it. He'll take it. He's also said, originally said the world's people will be there, yes, including Palestinians. Now, no, Palestinians have no right of return. Your response to what's going on there?
It is so appalling, Amy, what is going on now. Trump says it in public, what his predecessors used to say in private, that effectively they're going to let Israel have its way, both in Gaza and, believe you me, in the West Bank. They will both be ethnically cleansed. That has been Israeli policy for decades, and now they feel they've had leaders in the United States. Trump is, of course, shameless and open about it. Biden did exactly the same thing. For 6 months, Hamas had agreed to the ceasefire plan. Netanyahu didn't want a ceasefire, and Biden backed him. So one problem we have today, that the reason you have Trump is because the previous administration was so weak-willed and so weak-minded and incapable of doing anything, whereas in this very country we had Reagan, Bush, Truman calling Israel to heel when they exceeded what was considered to be decent, honorable, according to the United States policies. When they refused to obey, they were called to a heel. Neither Biden and now Trump calling these people enough. The whole world is seeing what you're up to. Enough. We will not tolerate it. Netanyahu threatening to break the ceasefire, and the response of the United States president is what? The response is nothing to do with the ceasefire, but we're going to take Gaza. We can. The Israelis have got it for you by killing over 100,000 people, and now we'll do with it as we please. I mean, if this is the way the United States empire is going to carry on functioning, there will be more and more, not immediately, there will be more and more resistance. If even the King of Jordan and Sisi in Egypt, who have so far backed the United States, are getting slightly scared, it's not because they've changed greatly, it's they're scared there will be an uprising in their countries. Jordan is 3/4 Palestinian anyway, and the Egyptian masses are seething. So we have a really extremely serious situation building up in the Middle East, where they publicly, in front of everyone, want to expel the Palestinians. No cover-up. Netanyahu says we're going to do it. The US president supports him.
And Tariq, the famous Palestinian-American intellectual Edward Said was a friend of yours. You write about him in your memoir. Said was prophetic in many ways in terms of his skepticism of the possibility of a two-state solution. What are your sense of how he would have responded to what's happening today?
Well, yeah, Edward was a very dear friend. We often discussed Palestine. And he felt, as did many others, that the only serious solution for that region was a one-state solution with equal rights for all its citizens, male, female, Jews, non-Jews, etc. That was the only way we could proceed, because a two-state solution had become a joke. I mean, if you look what's been happening in Gaza for a year, an open genocide. If you see what they're starting to do to the West Bank now, a two-state solution is impossible. No one will believe in it. But a single-state solution has also now become very difficult, in my opinion. It's the worst situation to confront the Palestinians. I mean, 70%, between 60 and 70% of the Israeli population back Netanyahu. You have large numbers of Zionist citizens of Israel coming out and chanting once again, "Kill the Arabs," just like many German fascists shouted, "Kill the Jews." What is going on? And the US, in my opinion, is completely abdicated its role to be an arbiter. It never was an arbiter, but now that's just become a complete joke. So the situation seems grim to me, and whether it can be resolved simply within the area currently Israel-Palestine, or whether it will have to expand and extend to the rest of the Arab world before people see sense, is an open question.
And I'm wondering, as you mentioned the situation in Israel, clearly we just had a segment talking about authoritarianism in Europe as well, the rise of fascist and right-wing movements and especially anti-immigrant movements throughout Europe. What is your sense of the role or the problems in terms that the left has had in confronting these movements?
The real problem, Juan, is this, that all political parties, prior to the rise of these extreme right parties that the professor was talking about, prior to that, we had a center-left and a center-right. Both of them supported the economic system we call neoliberalism, a very extreme, rampant type of turbocharged capital, which wrecked the social structure of many of these countries, privatized large industries, entered into the domains of health and most sacred and hallowed sections of the old post-Second World War state. And that collapse, and the fact that parties of the center-left and center-right, whenever they came to power, did exactly the same thing. I wrote a book called The Extreme Center about these groups. They've now been shown to be what they were, which is useless. So there's a great hostility against these politicians, and there is nothing on to the left of them in most places. France is an exception. And what people do now is turn to the right, saying we've tried all these jokers out. These guys are talking what seems to be our language. Let's see what they're like. And from that point of view, this big turn to the far right, in a sort of curious way, it's fitting that the champion now sits at the White House, the most right-wing president in recent years, especially on the domestic front. So there is a symbiosis taking place between the European far right and the far right government we seem to have got in the United States, and how they will work together. I mean, one problem they have is, and this should be talked about, that Zelensky's government in Ukraine, its hardcore, are not just people who are far right, but they are actual lineal descendants of Ukrainian Nazis who have been fighting. We shouldn't forget that too. It's part of the picture. Just because the West is backing Ukraine doesn't mean that these things are not going on there. So it's very difficult to give this a gloss. What is happening in the West as a whole is pretty disastrous. It's not just Orban. He's very open, like Trump. Yeah, this is what we're doing. We don't care what you think. We're going to do it. We've been elected. We have the power to do it. There are people like that, but there are another layer of people who supposedly oppose them, who, when it comes down to it, have policies which are not all that different. I mean, what the United States and much of Europe needs today is an opposition which fights back politically, intellectually, with arguments, and when necessary, comes out on the streets, extra-parliamentary actions to defend democracy.
We just have 30 seconds. The most important message following up on that rising up at the grassroots you feel people need to hear around the world now from your decades of activism?
I think we need activists more than ever before. I mean, one of the most amazing things has been this opposition by students in this country, occupations of universities in defense of the people, the Palestinians and the people of Gaza. We now need to extend these movements to what is happening domestically.
We're going to continue this conversation and post it online at democracynow.org. Tariq Ali, Pakistani-British historian, activist, filmmaker, editor of the New Left Review. Latest book, You Can't Please All, Memoirs 1980 to 2024. Happy birthday to Messiah Rhodes, Dante Torriere, and Rustam. I'm Amy Goodman, Juan Gonzalez.